Yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to the Georgetown School Committee. The regular session of Thursday, September 8th, 2011 is called to order. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and it includes the approval of minutes for the regular session of 8/25/11 and the acceptance of warrants 11V12 and 10P12. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is the introduction of our student representative, Matt Hartford. Matt's a senior at Georgetown High School, and he's a president of the Student Council, and he's going to join us at every meeting and give us an update on what's going on at the high school. So it's all yours. Welcome.
Thank you. So far, off to a good school year. All the students came into school and then noticed like the spots were paved, the garage is painted.
Oh, nice.
Everyone likes what you guys did with the back lot, especially adding a couple more spots. Because that was only the really big issue, especially for seniors, was being one of the largest grades coming through.
Right.
Was that so many kids didn't get a spot. That's the only issue so far, but that's understandable. So off to a good start.
Great.
Nice.
Okay, next, our audiences. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on any item on the agenda or in general? No public agenda items, I don't believe, at this point. Okay, so next up is Jim Pacone, who is a candidate to be an interim business manager for us. So if you want to come up, Jim, and
Just give us a little background. to-
Jim's going to give us an outline of what he's done and talk a
you.
little bit about what we're looking for, and we'll kind
are
of
you?
walk through that.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I've, in 40 years of being in education, I've been to a lot of these meetings, probably more meetings than any of you have been on this earth. So I say thank you for having me here. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a Salem resident. I'm married to a teacher who retired from the Danvers School Department. She was a 30-year grade 4 teacher. And we live in the city of Salem. We have 2 children. They're both grown, 35 and 31. They both went to college. One went to Bentley, one went to Assumption. And we didn't get any financial aid, which was a little shocking. But I started my career in education as a teacher at Peabody High School back in the 70s. And when I was a teacher at Peabody High, I wanted to get into administration, and the principal of the building asked me to be his assistant when there was a retirement. So at age 29, I was the assistant principal at Peabody High School. And one of my functions as the assistant to the principal was I had to do the school budget. And the Peabody High School budget was the largest budget for the school department, and I became very good at it. And the superintendent, Bob Ireland, at the time, liked the document that I was using. So when the business administrator from Peabody retired, Bob Ireland suggested that I apply for the job, and I did. And I became the business administrator for the Peabody School Department. And I stayed there for a number of years. I worked with a very, very progressive mayor named Peter Terigian. I don't know if any of you remember that name. He was voted at one point the best mayor in Massachusetts by the Salem Evening News. But Peter and I, as the mayor, he was chairman of the school committee, I really received a lot of tutoring from him in the budgetary process for a city. And after staying in Peabody for 17 years, the job in Burlington opened up as the assistant superintendent for business, and I applied. It was one of 35 people to apply, and they hired me. And I became the assistant superintendent in Burlington. And while I was in Burlington, they allowed me to go to BC, Boston College, and I got my doctorate in education at BC through the PSEP, Professional School Administrators Program, 18 years ago. And so I stayed in my position for 14 years as the assistant superintendent for business, and when the superintendent retired, the school committee appointed me. They didn't even advertise. They just appointed me superintendent, and I stayed for 7 years as the superintendent. And I retired. I had been in education for over 30-some-odd years, and after I retired, I was teaching at Salem State. I teach school finance at Salem State and at Fitchburg. My phone rang. I was in class at Salem State. It was a summer institute class, and my phone was ringing and ringing and ringing. I try to ignore it because I'm teaching class, but anyway, it was the chairman of the Burlington School Committee asking me to come back to work. And I said, why? I'm retired. She said, the superintendent who replaced you just passed away this morning at age 46. So I went back to Burlington, and I stayed a whole year while they did another search. And I went into retirement again, and in retirement as a superintendent, I know a lot of the superintendents in the Middlesex Valley. The Winchester School superintendent called me and asked me if I would be his director of finance while he did a search. And I went to Winchester and stayed for 3 months. They conducted a search. They hired the business administrator from Salem, where I live, to go to Winchester. And the plan was I was going to go to Salem. And my wife and I were in San Francisco on the Golden Gate Bridge, and my phone rang, and it was a superintendent from Salem, and he said, "Jim," he said, "good news, bad news. The good news is," he said, "we hired a person last night. The bad news is we don't need you to come in when you come back from San Francisco." My wife was in the passenger seat clapping that I wasn't going to go back to work. Well, anyway, they hired a person in Salem to take the business administrator job, and I went to the SEAM Collaborative in Stoneham as the executive director for 1 year, because the executive director resigned with a month's notice, and they had no one. And I went to SEAM Collaborative, not MEC Collaborative, SEAM Collaborative. And the reason I stress that is there's a controversy going on right now about MEC. But anyway, I went to SEAM Collaborative for a year as executive director. The gentleman in Salem who took the job that I was supposed to take didn't work out, so I went back to Salem last December, and I was there today. So I'm just finishing up. I'm doing the end-of-year report for Salem, and I'm mentoring the new business guy who is a certified public accountant, came out of the banking industry, knows nothing about public schools, nothing about anything of that nature, so I'm mentoring him for just a few hours a week. So then I got an email from Georgetown wondering if I'd be interested in helping them while they conduct a search, and the answer is yes, provided it's not full-time, because I am retired. But anyway.
Your wife. You tried to be retired for a while.
Anyway, just a couple of asides. One of the positions that I held, even as superintendent, when I was at the Burlington Superintendent, the Mass School Building Authority had an advisory board. If you remember, a few years ago, the Mass School Building Authority went into a moratorium where they weren't accepting any applications because they were redoing their department. And Catherine Craven is the executive director of the Mass School Building Authority. And she asked me if I would represent the Massachusetts School Superintendents Association on the advisory board, and I took that position. And I used to go to all the meetings. We rewrote the regulations about class sizes. If you're building a new school, your classrooms have to be 900 square feet for a regular class and 1,200 plus square feet for kindergarten classes. And anyway, so after working with Catherine on the advisory board, when I retired, she said to me, "You should come to work for me." And I did. Until I went back to Burlington. I couldn't serve as superintendent and be a paid consultant for them, so I had to resign. But Catherine Craven is a very close ally of mine, and I'm a close ally of hers, so I know her quite well. And I'm not sure if you're heading into a school building authority program, but if you are, I could advise you about the do's and don'ts, because I work there.
Yeah, we're doing a feasibility study. In fact, we're going to be talking about that right now, after you.
I'm sure you are.
That's the next discussion.
So anyway, that's my background. I'm still teaching the School of Finance. I had a class last night from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock last night with 16 graduate students. They were all principals, assistant principals, and interesting class. It's school finance, by the way, in case any of you want to drop in and say hello.
Now, obviously, Jim wants to work part-time.
Yes.
So Jim and Julie and I had an initial conversation about how we might distribute duties and responsibilities, and that obviously needs to be continued. But Jim, you're talking about 2 days a week right now, right?
Yes, if that suits your needs, Carol, as superintendent, yes, I could do that. I would prefer to do Tuesday, Thursday, if that works for you, or whatever combination is best for you. Right now, I'm working 5 days a week in Salem, but, excuse me, let me back up. Until July 1st, I was 5 days a week, but it was only 6 hours a day, so I was a part-time, 30-hour-a-week person. And I did complete the $50 million budget. It was approved by the City Council, and it's in operation right now. And I'm almost done with the Salem State Report, which I'm finishing up.
Okay.
So, And your state report needs to be done
It does.
before September
Yeah,
30th.
it does. And, you know, I wrote a little bit about this in the orange notes, but there obviously needs to be more conversation about it. But, you know, Julie has filled in as interim for several times, at least 4, right, in the time that she's been here. And so, you know, there may be some additional responsibilities that Julie would need to assume, given the fact that Jim would not be here every single day. And he would be accessible and available, and he would do as much as he could, but certainly there would be things that Julie would need to do. So I think in the interim, you know, my recommendation is that we make Julie the assistant business manager, and we increase her compensation, which of course we can discuss how that would work. In addition to that, you know, so we need to look at the budget in terms of what was budgeted for Terry's salary and try to figure out with Jim, well, what would the amount of money that he would be needing or expecting, and then how we would negotiate something with Julie. So I believe in the executive session, Jim was agreeing to stay, that you might have a conversation with him about what he's envisioning or how he thinks it could work. And then we obviously would hopefully be able to come up with some agreement, and then we could determine when we could start, if this was the way we wanted to go, and then move forward. So that's sort of where we are with the process right now. Do any of you have any questions for Jim? He said he'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone on the committee had.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I think we're very fortunate that you are interested, but I'm curious, why?
Why, George?
Rob, let me tell you, when I retired from Burlington, I actually ended up with a sleep disorder. And my wife, a retired teacher, she said to me, you know why you can't sleep at night? Because you're coming from a high-profile job to getting up in the morning, reading the paper, and having a cup of coffee. And I'm too young to retire. I mean, I have a lot of hobbies. I build furniture, and I have a little workshop in my garage. But that's not enough to keep me busy. So I enjoy doing these fill-in assignments because I know there's a beginning, and I know there's someday somebody's going to come and take this job, and, you know, I'll go back into retirement again, or until the next assignment comes. But,
One of the
That's all.
things he's also agreeing to do, if we want this, is to assist us in
Question about it.
finding the next business administrator. He's got quite a few people that he networks with. He feels that he would be able to help us, you know, kind of assess what we need, and then try to, you know, appropriately solicit applicants that would be interested in coming to Georgetown and would fit our needs.
And just as a follow-up to what Carol just said, every job I have taken, I was always on the search committee to find the suitable replacement for the job that I was holding. Even the executive director of the SEAM Collaborative, I was on the search committee and chose my successor. In Salem, I was on the search committee and chose it wasn't my vote, but I was one of the voting members of the search committee. So, in the certification program, and as I said to you, I teach school finance, I have, in the past, have had superintendents in my class, school business officials, town meeting members, school committee members. So I can identify people through the class process about who's a good candidate, who's not a good candidate. And a lot of these people that I'm talking about are looking to become school administrators. And the school business official position, by the way, is rather unique because there is a license that goes with this called the school business official. And there's not many people out there holding certification. In fact, 75% of the current school business officials are not certified. And but I don't want that to scare you if you think you have a good candidate in front of you and he doesn't or she doesn't have the certification. They can work on it through MASBO, the Mass Association of School Business Officials. They can get that certification. It might take them a year or a year and a half to do it. But I'd be in a position to say to you, in my experience and in my knowledge base, this person would be good for Georgetown. This person would not be good for Georgetown. So I wouldn't
That would
steer
be
you
a
in the
huge
wrong
help.
direction.
It's a great wealth. It's a great wealth of knowledge.
Tremendous help.
Okay.
And just as an aside, we had a Budget and Finance Committee meeting right before this, and he jumped right in and gave us some great ideas and kind of helped us lay out a plan for what to do next. So it was very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Thank you very much. And then
Thank you.
we'll
I'm going to sit in the audience.
perfect. And then we'll talk
Thank you.
toward the end. Okay, next is Chuck Adam.
You good?
and Carl Franceschi for the Pembroke grade configuration,
You want to come on up?
as well as Ellie Sinkowitz, and I'm sorry, I don't know the other names.
You have Paul with you, right?
Paul Brown.
And Paul Brown, okay.
He's observing.
Okay,
Listening, okay.
I'm just support.
Great
welcome.
moral support.
Yeah, for the first time ever, I'm here for support.
Oh,
I was here 2
well,
weeks ago.
Carl, it's all yours.
Yeah, this is, we're glad to have Carl here, and we thought this was a great opportunity for you all to meet him. So thanks for inviting us, and we're going to turn it right to Carl, because he's got the show tonight.
Okay,
Sure. Well, first of all, we're excited to be part of this whole team and process and, determining the future of Pembroke Elementary School. As you may know, I know you've got Rob in your committee, and Carol's probably kept you up to date a little bit on the process, but this is timely that we can start talking about grade configuration, because that's going to be one of the key decisions that we need to make early on here. We are working with the School Building Authority, and they've already resolved with Georgetown that we should consider 3 different possible grade configurations for Pembroke. One, the existing grades, 2 through 5, 2 grades 1 through 6, and 3 grades kindergarten through 6. So there are 3 different possibilities there. And as part of the feasibility study, we need to develop educational programs for each of these options. And then there are also issues about how we would accommodate the educational program on the current site, whether it's in a renovated building, renovated and expanded building, or all new construction. And so you can quickly see how, and we've produced this graphic for the building committee already. There's a number of building sort of configurations, and then there were 3 grade configurations. So we already have this matrix of possible options, and we'd like to narrow it down as soon as we can. And one of the key decisions, as I say, is on the educational program, and that's really where you come in as a school committee. Because it's the building committee recognizes it's not really their decision to decide, should this be kindergarten through grade 6 or keep it at 2 through 5 or whatever. It's more of an educational decision. And in fact, the state, the MSBA, I think would look to your input, the superintendent's input, your input as a school committee, as to why one of these configurations makes more sense than the other. And so I guess I'm here tonight to sort of facilitate that discussion, to move it along. We will develop educational programs for each of those options. We're still sort of obligated to do that, and we'll do it to help satisfy the MSBA, who are very thorough and want each community to make sure they examine all possible options before moving ahead with a preferred direction. So we'll still do that, but we want to get this discussion started at this time. I don't expect it to be resolved tonight, but maybe at your next meeting, do you meet every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
Is that right, Ann? That might be timely if that could work out, that there's some preference shown at that time that would, I think, fit right into our process. Because ultimately, the first milestone that we're trying to hit, or first major deliverable to the state school building authority, is in early October, where we want to have a preferred educational program and a preferred design option as to which way to go, renovation or addition or new construction. In preparation for the discussion, I jotted down some notes myself, but I think over all of this, there's, at least from our experience, and DRA does design a lot of schools, so we do get involved in these discussions. We do have educational programming specialists on board and all, and we attend conferences with superintendents, and we try to read the same newsletters and, keep ourselves up to date on educational issues. But we are architects first and foremost, and but to share with you our experience on this particular discussion, the research is not definitive as to what is the best grade configuration, first of all. We should say that at elementary school level. And we already know, I think, from our limited exposure and those who have been involved in the project longer than we have, that it makes sense to bring the sixth grade back to Pembroke. The high school is overcrowded. The sixth graders are occupying science space, as we understand it. And, you know, it wasn't really designed for sixth graders. And so it makes a lot of sense educationally and sort of programmatically to bring the sixth grade back. So that means of the three options, we're sort of narrowing it down to two then. Should Pembroke be grades 1 through 6 or grade kindergarten through 6? So if we focus on that, obviously the difference is, you know, should kindergarten be part of the elementary school, or should kindergarten be at Pearlie and be part of a, you might call it a preschool center? And in that regard, again, from our experience and a couple of educational consultants we've talked with, there's sort of limited research in that regard too to guide your discussion, educationally at least. There's sort of varied results. But the way we look at it, there are sort of educational issues to be considered. There are, you might say, operational issues, and then there are political issues, I
And
guess.
financial issues, right.
Financial, right. To help make this decision as to where kindergarten should be. Should it be at Pembroke or should it be at Pearlie? That's basically, you know, narrowing down the discussion here. Educationally, we could share with you a couple points. One, research does show, I guess, that the fewer transitions that students have to make in their career, the better their performance. That tends to be tested more at like upper grade levels. You know, should there be a K3 school and then or K2 school and a 3-5 school, or should there be K6 versus K through 6 versus K through 8? Those are more where the research shows the comparisons. But you can imagine that, you know, for a couple different reasons, students can get used to a certain setting. Teachers can, you know, have contact with students over a longer period of time when they spend more time in one facility. And parents who might have multiple children in one school, it's a little advantage. Parents tend to get more invested in a school the longer the students are there, as opposed to a short stay at one school and then moving on. So I guess those are various reasons why student performance may be better when there are fewer transitions. Also, students, I guess, have a tendency to get lost sometimes the first year in a new building, and can fall in cracks and sort of be left behind a little bit and take some time to catch up. So there's a little bit of a, you know, could be a little plateau in their development as opposed to, so that would argue for kindergarten being part of the elementary school, I guess. And that's probably the strongest piece of evidence of anything. The other things are less tangible and less supported by documentation as to, you know, educationally. But just to think about from your point of view in trying to make educational decisions here, a couple of things that that we'd note is that there is a tendency, as you're probably aware, that more academic work is happening in kindergarten now than it used to. And that would argue perhaps that kindergarten it would benefit by being part of an elementary school, that those students that have access to the resources that are part of the elementary school, the teachers that are there, the specialists, the special ed teacher, whatever it might be, they might, if you think of it long term, is that the trend, then kindergarten teachers might benefit by being in a cohort with first grade and second grade teachers more than they would with preschool teachers, perhaps. It might be a slight difference, but again, you could take the longer term view and say, well, maybe preschool is going to be up where kindergarten is now pretty soon, and those, you know, two grades do make sense to be together. I don't know in that regard. One of the obvious consequences of moving first grade and or kindergarten up is that it's going to free up some space in the Pearlie school. That space may allow the preschool program to expand, perhaps. And again, that might be a positive. I don't know. But Certainly, again, if you look historically, preschool, early childhood programs are growing, so that might be a positive for the town. And as we said, if kindergarten remained at Pearlie, then for those students who don't go to preschool, kindergarten would be their first experience, and then they'd be leaving that building after 1 year there. So that's something to consider.
Bless you. Bless.
Operationally, you probably know better than I, but a couple of the things that we see as points to be considered. If the kindergartners were to be part of the elementary school, would you still have a principal of the Pearlie school? If, both kindergarten and first grade are now part of Pembroke, you'd need, I guess, a director for the preschool program, perhaps. I don't know administratively if you still have a principal there. That's something to consider operationally, financially, and maybe busing too. I don't know. If that Pearlie school were only preschool, would there be any busing to that site? If not, then there possibly could be some savings in busing costs. You'd only be busing students to the
Probably
to the
special
Pembroke site.
education busing costs, but other than that.
Yeah, the smaller buses, yeah, perhaps. And I don't know if you'd continue to have food service at the Pearlie school too in the same capacity. If you had no kindergarten and first graders there, would you still provide? And so there may be some operational savings there as well. On the other hand, bringing kindergartners to the Pembroke site might mean that there's some slight differences that would be needed in the design of that building. That we'd want to make sure playgrounds were, appropriate for kindergarten-age children. It's not that different than first graders, but it's a little bit of a subtlety there. There might need to be, or want to be, separate entrances or separate drop-off areas. Even though they're arriving at the same time, they'd be riding the same buses, but still, sometimes you see, and I observed the pick-up and drop-off the other day there, so for the youngest kids, sometimes parents like to park and walk their child in, as opposed to, being part of the queue of driving through and just letting the kids off on their own, if you had young children there. So it might affect the site design and the building design a bit in that fashion, if kindergartners were at Pembroke too. And then lastly, under the column of what we'd say is political issues, is the notion of moving kindergarten and first grade out of Pearlie frees up that space for the town, for the school department, first of all. What would it become? That's, I guess, a positive, and it gives you some flexibility. I understand there may be some deed restrictions with Pearlie remaining an
It has to be
educational
an educational purpose.
building. There may be some issues with MSBA. We talked about this a little bit with the building committee, that certainly bringing sixth graders, bringing first graders is a bigger project to the MSBA than just grades 2 through 5. But if we, agree that makes the most sense educationally, I think MSBA would agree. The question of bringing kindergarten is now making the project even that much bigger. One quick rule of thumb to think about in our look at the programming here, the number of children involved. Each grade that is added to the program is about 10 to 12,000 square feet of building that's needed, and roughly, and again, don't quote this, but recent projects have shown that that's worth about $300 per square foot in new construction, if it were to go new construction, less if it's renovation, but so that's like $3 million, $3 to $4 million per grade. So certainly that's one of the issues to think about in bringing kindergarten there. The project would expand by that much, and because it's expanding, MSBA would want to take a hard look at it and understand why does it need to be. And if one of your reasons is because you want to free up space in the Pearlie school for other reasons, MSBA may not accept that and not support that financially. If you were to say that bringing kindergarten to Pembroke made the most sense educationally and could support that, I think MSBA would support that. Regardless of, they may ask, what do you plan to do with the space left? And you'd want to have a suitable answer, I guess. But the other side of it that occurred to us too is that perhaps if you did make the argument that educationally it made sense for the kindergartners to be at Pembroke, at least that puts all of MSBA's responsibilities now in one building, because they would no longer have any involvement in the Pearlie school. Whereas if they were still a kindergarten grade there, technically their purview is kindergarten through grade 12. So they'd still have some, you might say, responsibility for that building at some time. Not now maybe, but in the future. And maybe they'd look at that as a positive, that, you know, they'd be taking care of this all at once as opposed to some deferred kind of issue there by leaving the kindergartners there. So it could go both ways. We haven't talked to MSBA about this. I imagine that we probably will soon in one of our discussions with them.
We have weekly conference calls with them. We couldn't have ours this week. Chris Alice is on his vacation. He has young kids, so he doesn't have to tie into the school year like the rest of us. We're going to do that with him in our next call to talk about that and a few of the other issues, to start to cross these things off the list. And that's one of the issues we'll approach with them. It also, as Carl said, it also, by freeing up and taking the 6th grade, it allows the authority to see that their involvement in a future project at the high school, middle school, may change so much. Because if you're freeing up space up there, you're allowing that building to breathe, as we like to say. The building starts to breathe and goes back to what it's meant to be. The authority will, in our experience, has looked at those kind of things and said, that's good for the building, that's good for the future of the building, and perhaps they look at that, we hope, we convince them, we look at that and say, that may, what's the word I want to say, it won't get rid of their exposure, but it starts to diminish their exposure perhaps for that building, for a future project, because you've done so much work up there. So, those are the pluses and the pluses and the minuses, the pros and cons that we'll go through continuing. Why this is important for you, as Carl said, I don't want to interrupt Carl, I just want to make sure. It's going to come to a point where we'll not only need your committee to vote, and the school committee chair will need to sign on I won't say that it's an affidavit, David, but it's a part of the submittal to the authority that says your board has discussed it, you've reviewed it, and you've all come to this conclusion, and it gets signed off. It not only gets signed off by your committee, gets signed off by the building committee, but also gets signed off by the Board of Selectmen. Presentation will make more or less the same thing to them. Actually, I think we're on their agenda coming up in the next week or so, we'll make a presentation to them and get them involved and come back for a vote, official vote to move forward. This is all in their vein of everybody knows every step of the way what's going on. It's all transparent, so it's a very good process. Sorry for interrupting. I just
No,
wanted to make
that's,
sure we hit those.
it's an appropriate point, because that's a lot to think about, but those are the issues that we've identified in trying to make this decision and help guide your discussion. But be happy to answer some questions or see if I could find some more supporting research or evidence if you have some specific questions too, and what's out there in the literature and all, in our experience.
I know there's going to be a meeting, a public meeting on
Yes.
next Thursday. Is that
Yes.
what it is?
September
Are you going to
15th.
be at that?
Yes,
gonna
definitely.
run it.
We'll sort of facilitate it,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
And this will be one of the discussion, the format for that, just briefly, we can use this time to plug that meeting, I guess, is we'd like to make a brief presentation about the process and the feasibility study and so forth, and where we're headed and that sort of thing, and inform people about what we've sort of learned to date. We don't have any solutions yet, we don't have any proposals to make, but then we'd like to break up into smaller discussion groups, depending on how many folks are there. And oftentimes it's most effective if each of the discussion groups focuses on a different topic. One certainly could be on educational issues, grade configuration included. One might be on, site issues, and one might be on green environmental sustainability ideas, that kind of thing. So,
I'll send a connected
Where is,
message out about that.
Yeah, it's Thursday
Thursday, it's
At the school.
at Pembroke
Seven.
at 7 o'clock. So all of
7 to
you,
8:30.
7 to 8.
so everyone at home, Pembroke next Thursday, September 15th, 7 to 8:30.
right.
Please attend the community
Right.
meeting for the Pembroke School Building Project.
And it
I'd like
isn't
to-
just parents. I
I'd
think we
like
need to
to-
say that. It's not just parents. It's really.
It
like
should
the
be
community.
parents, it should be
Community.
residents, everyone that lives here is welcome to attend.
I would like to add to that, that it's for the community, this is a meeting for the community to provide their input into the design of this project. This is when it happens. This is the first meeting, And I strongly encourage the community and anybody who's interested to show up at the first meeting, because as everyone knows, as projects move along and you go further and further down the track, things start to get cast in stone, and it gets harder and harder to go backwards. So I think this is probably the most important, this is just my opinion, but the most important of the meetings coming up.
I agree. It's at 7, right?
7 to 8:30.
Yeah.
And we'd really like to make sure that a lot of the neighbors come, because
Yeah.
one of the discussions we'd like to facilitate will be based around traffic.
Right, we know traffic's an issue, and having the butters there would be useful to get their input firsthand.
There'll be information in the paper, there'll be,
There was today.
the cable,
It is on cable now.
screen is going to go around, meetings like this, meeting Board of Selectmen, I'll do a Connect Ed. So we're trying
There's an
to
article in
use
the
all
paper.
kinds of media sources to
Did
try
we
to get
get
the information
the
out.
blinking sign at the corner of
Oh, yeah, we're
Elm
gonna,
and-
that's
Is that
gonna
gonna work?
happen
Yeah, I think it's gonna
too.
do that
Yep,
for you.
that's gonna happen.
Questions? Rob?
You've already touched on what I heard you say, is that the issue of adding kindergarten as far as a separate entrance, as far as some sort of recognition of their age in relationship to the others being separate, is something that the design process can definitely respond to.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
important.
it's a little different, obviously, if it's a renovation addition project versus a new school and how that's handled.
Yep.
It's probably easier and more flexible in a new design where, you know, we have a little bit freer and,
think
but
so.
we would take it into account even if it were an addition project.
I'd be very, I don't know when the right time is, I'd be very curious to hear what Donna and Margaret have to say about their opinions of the K going up. I'm very interested in their opinions. I don't know if this is the time to do that or not.
Why don't we just open the questions up, and then next meeting, maybe Donna and Margaret can share their opinions on where they think the grade configuration should go, because we're not voting tonight.
No.
They're just.
But that'll give them time.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to put them on the spot now, not having had time to prepare. And then.
I can tell you what my opinion is.
Well,
So-
I think
I wanna hear
that's
that
kind of the
too.
purpose of the discussion tonight, is
Yeah.
for you all to debate.
Yeah, I think-
Discuss, what do you think, because, and then obviously people can be informed and have some time to think about it and come back next week, and if you're taking a vote.
Yeah.
I guess getting new information from two that I consider very important people, the day of the meeting that we're going to vote, my vote would be to get whatever information's available now as part of a discussion.
But I don't want to put them on the spot.
Well, we can email them. You can
But-
email questions to them.
Yeah.
That'll work.
But no, it needs to be discussion. I think it needs to be discussion. That's what I'm getting at. This is supposed to be a discussion. It's not putting, I don't look at it as putting them on the spot. I look at it as discussion.
Well, do we want to maybe talk about it?
Why
And
don't
if
we
they
talk
want to
about it, and then
after?
if they want to
if they
add
wanna,
something?
You know, talk now and think about it, maybe?
I think there's,
And then they can come back to
I
us
think there's a
tonight?
lot of issues here. It's not, I mean, the educational part is obviously a very important component, but the use of the space and the bus, I mean, I'd like to have time, not right here, but I'd like to have time to do some of my own homework.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
You know
certainly.
what I mean? Because I'm
Definitely.
thinking of like, for example, the Pearly School, I'm thinking, how many classrooms do they have for kindergarten? Like 6?
5.
So you got those 5 large classrooms. I mean, you're not going to expand the preschool program by 100 people. I mean, right? I mean, I don't know how many.
How many do we
preschool-
turn away?
How many kids do we have that are not from Georgetown that are in the preschool program?
None. So
So, I
that's,
mean, unless a whole bunch of people move in, I mean, how are you going to expand it?
Or how many do we turn away? That would give us
Well-
an idea of.
There's a lot
Of
that
current-
aren't here because they don't have the flexibility that some of the other private preschools have right now.
And then we would
And
be
you
able
might
to
be
do
able
the
to do
flexibility.
much
you
more
would be,
flexible
right, you
groupings
would be
at
able
that
to
point.
add, because remember, all of our programs are self-sufficient, with
Right.
the exception of our special needs students who come. Everyone else
Right.
pays for tuition. So, I mean, that's certainly one of the viable options, is to use some of the space that would become available to offer more alternatives in the area of preschool. We also have been talking about bringing our own special ed programs, as you know, in-house. Sometimes what you can do is you can create in-house programs that you can invite other communities to send students to, you know, as opposed to outside placements and that kind of thing. So those are all discussions we haven't got a plan for, but those are all things that could be possible. We also have, as you know, major space issues So some of that. The other thing is at the middle high school, right now we have all the special ed offices there. It would be really good to have, and the curriculum director, sort of wherever we can find a space for. Might be nice to have all the administrative team be at Pearlie, all being able to work together and coordinate programs, freeing up spaces at the middle high school that are now taken by them. That would not only the space you gain from the classroom space, but we'd also gain office space as well as a result of that. So those are just a few things that could be done with the space.
And you said you had an opinion, and I'd love to hear it.
Well, I was, I was a teacher, early childhood teacher, and programmatically, I think now that Georgetown has decided to go to full-day K, the continuum should go from K all the way through. And I think having the children, as a parent who went through that, when my children moved, it was traumatic for them at second grade. I can't imagine them having to move over there, after kindergarten. I think it's better for them to just be where they're supposed to be and go on. I mean, when I taught in Brookline, it's K to 8, pre-K to 8 at all the schools, and it's, that works there too. So anyway you set it up, it'll work, but I think educationally for the children, socially, emotionally, and educationally, it's better for them to start where they're going to be rather than make them switch midway through. Plus the curriculum can flow better. You have all your staff in one place. You don't have to worry about trying to make meetings, create meeting times for people at different schools. So that's just my opinion.
Just to build on that, because as you know, I'm also a teacher, but a lot of resources are duplicated. By having all of them in one spot, a lot of the teacher resources, especially between kindergarten and first grade, because there really should be a big connection. The town wouldn't really be duplicating a lot of things. Storage alone, I would say.
Well, and how many
That's
times do we go
huge
through the
money.
budget and we have a .2 for Pearlie and a .2
Right.
for Pembroke?
Right, moving
And,
staff.
I'm drawing a blank as to what some of them are, but we go through that.
Yeah.
Book
closets.
I think
Now it's
as
all off the top of my
often the case, I think it's going to come down to, the benefit of the children being there versus the cost. And
Always.
it always comes down to that.
I think
The benefits seem pretty clear.
I think I agree the benefits are there. The only thing I'm worried about, it's all going to come back to numbers, is we're still going to have to maintain Pearlie. So we're going to have 3 buildings that we have to maintain. I don't know that the town has the appetite or even the resources to maintain that building if we apportion a part of it to the town to use for their own offices or whatever they want to use it for. So I don't think we can necessarily say that we're going to have savings by moving them out, other than the synergies that we develop, because we're still going to have to pay for all the maintenance of it.
You're going to add more square footage to take care of.
Right, we will have more to take care of. I'm not certain on the administrative savings. I mean, my guess is you're going to have a principal and an assistant principal or 2 principals. I don't know how programmatically you're going to do that. So I don't know that that's really going to be savings. It's more that if we start to, so I'm nervous that we're going to go about, look at all the savings we're going to have, because I doubt at the end of the day it's going to be a huge amount of savings, because we're still going to have that other building. So it's going to come down to what's best for the kids, and can we afford that right change, because the cost of the building is going up at some rate. We don't know what that is yet.
Did I hear you say, and these were ballpark numbers that are just for planning purposes, 3 to 4 million per grade?
Right.
So that would be the additional
Right.
cost for K, and the town is
Development
obviously
cost.
correct.
Right, initial construction
Yeah.
costs.
So that is
Mhm.
kind of it.
Wow.
Would Jim be willing to chime in?
Glad to. Let me tell you why I'm glad to. Right before I left Burlington, I wrote a statement of interest. Has a statement of interest been filed with the
Yes.
MCA?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're
Good.
past
That's
that.
your
Yeah, we're in
first
that
step.
pipeline.
Okay.
Mhm.
I wrote the statement of interest for the new Memorial Elementary School, which is on Wynn Street in Burlington, and it's being dedicated next week. The new Memorial School, it's a K through 5 building that the school department has built, and it came in under budget. So when the town meeting appropriated the funding for the school, the amount of appropriation was about $2 million over what they needed. And Catherine Craven, when, you know how she likes to have these photo ops, she came and checked a great big check. She gave Bob Mercier, the town manager, a check of $15 million, which was the Burlington state reimbursement for the cost of the building. So Burlington ended up getting about 54% reimbursed. I have a feeling you're going to get a lot more than 54%.
Nope.
Nope,
You know,
almost 50.
49
Yeah,
Well, let me tell you, there are ways
Well,
to
that's
get
the
more.
base
Right,
rate.
that's
You
the
get
base.
more.
We've talked about the
That's the
points.
base.
Base rate.
If you take the green school approach and have, you know, you capture the rainwater on the roof and put it into holding tanks to flush the toilets, they're gonna give you extra points. So I'm just saying, there are ways to get the state to give you more money. One of the things they like also is if you do decide to build a new building, they love for you to use prototypical designs. So they have designs for elementary schools that would be K through 5 or K through 6, and you can choose one of those designs and save yourself a lot of money. And the state loves to have you do that because it saves the state money. And, those are some of the things.
How do you feel about
My
the
feeling
How do you
kindergarten?
feel
is
about the
keep
kindergarten?
kindergarten
Yeah,
kids in with the first graders and the second graders, keep them in one location.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with your structure of how many, what do you have, 2 elementaries?
No.
One.
Oh, you have
Well,
one.
we have 2, but they're
Two
split up.
buildings.
It's pre-K to 1.
Okay.
And then 2 to 5 right
So your
now.
plan would be, if I hear you correctly, is you're going to make one big elementary school and house all of them.
That's what we'd like.
Yeah, that makes the most economic sense. And there will be some savings in terms of personnel because of the duplication elimination. There will be some.
There will be some,
Yes.
but we are so lean with the way that we have people. I would agree in a normal budgeted
normal
school
town.
district where we don't have .2s at Pearlie and .4s at Pembroke. I would say absolutely, unequivocally, there would be savings, but I'm hesitant to go down the road of saying there's going to be notable savings by moving that one grade over, because I think there will be some, but it's not going to cover the development cost of $3 to $4 million.
We're here
Because that's a
because
third of our budgets.
Right.
It's just
And-
not going to happen.
we want your driving decision to be based educationally, because really, that's what this is about.
Right.
We know money is a factor. I mean, that's what's driving the building committee. But as a school committee, we really want you to make a decision educationally what you think is the best choice, because that's what will drive our decision as a building committee in working with Carl.
Right.
So I can see where you would like opinions and, you know, insight from the principals. I think that's great. I think you should all have that. But I think you should also be expressing your opinions and sharing ideas among each other. There are a lot of things you need to think about when it comes to this. But you have to get started. We're on a tight deadline. I
Right.
have to stress that.
October 7th or something.
Yeah, and
is when you have to report back.
And remember, that tight deadline is so that we can get this to town meeting.
In May.
Next May. So it's
Right.
next May and back. That's why
And it has
It's
to
everything.
be approved by
MSBA's schedule.
MSBA,
It's
yeah.
not like you're.
No, it's not
Yeah,
ours.
that's,
Right.
No, that's theirs.
How much room is there to slip, if any, on a decision being made at the next school committee meeting?
there really
There
isn't.
wouldn't be.
There is none,
They have to
because
make it
October
up.
And that's my
7th.
point. And so that's where, if there's all this information that needs to come out, I'm concerned how it's going to get disseminated, and it's just something that the cost issues you're talking about, maybe there's a way to get all this information prepared beforehand and sent to everybody well beforehand.
Are you talking about for the meeting next week, in 2 weeks?
The meeting
I'm
in
not sure
2
there'll be a
weeks,
lot of
the
that
22nd.
information available, will it?
No, I'm
You're
talking
referring to
about the
next school
school
committee
committee
No,
meeting,
he's
where
talking
we
about the
have to make a
committee.
Right,
decision.
but that's what I'm asking, Rob. What information are you thinking, what additional information are you thinking you're going to get at
Well,
that meeting? Because they
I'm
won't, they want your input so that they can move forward with studying these various
Understand.
options.
Understand.
They won't be able to present you with any kind of a draft option on the 22nd.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm
No,
not
he's
talking about
looking
that at
for
all.
like dollars for savings.
I mean,
Operational
I don't think
Ann
there's
is-
a way to know that.
Operational
Ann's-
I'm not sure, okay, we'll
Ann's
have to discuss
expressed
how
it-
we're going to get that.
Well,
I'm
this
not
is where
sure.
Ann's expressed just a question about the cost savings, how
Yeah.
much it will be, how much it won't be. I think that's going to take some time to have a reasonable answer for you. We're not going to be able to hit it on hit it with an I, but getting that kind of information before the 22nd. Otherwise, that kind of information, hearing from the other principals on that day. David had some questions, hearing that information on that day. It puts a lot of pressure on the school committee in that day to absorb it all and make a decision. And that's where I'm
Okay,
going.
then I think what we have to do is be very specific what information you're looking for to have in advance, because,
Maybe
you know,
that's.
Well, because
I'm
it's
not-
not, they don't
good.
have a
That
preferred
sounds
option
good.
yet, so
we,
they're
yeah,
still
it's
looking at
hard to
these
cost
three
something
different
that we don't
options
know
and
what
three
we're talking
different-
about. Yeah.
No, and what I'm talking about has nothing to do with the three options.
It's operational costs,
Yeah.
not design.
Yeah, he's looking more at current operational and education issues.
Yeah, yeah, it's not the design at all. I mean, that's
No,
me,
well, the
maybe
design has to
everybody
do with-
else is.
The cost goes, you're talking about what you're adding, what you're removing from Pearlie. That's what you're looking for, the operational cost, and you don't know that because they don't have a design yet.
No, well, in the options, if you're not going to, if you're going to add kindergarten and it's gonna add this number that no one should hold on to, but I guarantee it'll get held on to, 3 to 4 million per grade.
Right.
There can be some assumptions made under that model. If you don't bring K through, there can be assumptions made under that model. It's not that hard.
Okay, so let me just this is how I thought what the process was going to be. That I might be wrong on this. That you wanted the school committee to discuss educationally what option, if any, they preferred. Not necessarily cast in stone, but just letting the committee, letting the group
Guide.
know.
Because the
okay,
finances are their
the majority of
issue.
people
That's the next
feel,
step.
let me just finish. The majority of people feel that, we want to go with, with K to 6, or, because it's educationally beneficial. Let's just pretend, okay? Then that information is considered as part of the discussion that these groups are having regarding the various options. At that point of discussing the various options, they're costing out things, including what the potential savings might be, as part of the process. I'm not sure that, I'm thinking that what you're asking for, you'll get the opportunity to look at all of those options, you'll get to look at all of those costs. I feel like it'll be real numbers as opposed to something we might contrive, unless Carl feels like he can produce for us numbers, but he won't know, he's not going to decide what the Pearlie costs are
Asked
going
us
to be.
for our educational perspective.
But don't we have also a responsibility to the town? That it's not
No,
just
that's not ours.
educational
I mean-
perspective.
Well,
Well, that's the building
You're not making a
committee's
decision on the,
responsibility.
that'll be the
That's
preferred
not our
option
decision.
discussion,
But
Rob.
we're mixing issues here. I think what we're talking about is we need to guide them on grade configuration.
That's right.
And their concern is that we guide them from an educational perspective. But one of the things I always, personally, it's just the way it just boils down to numbers for me. So that's why the numbers that I'm looking at are more from a school budget perspective, where we are now, and when we say, if we make a blanket statement that there could be cost savings, what I don't want to have happen is we make a decision assuming there will be cost savings within our own budget, has nothing to do with your development costs or your future costs for whatever building program we come up with. That's where that's the issue that I just have to think about when I come up with where I want to be on it. And to me, that's just part of the whole educational process. I mean, because we have to balance the two.
And does the
What's-
school department have the ability to calculate those staffing costs now
That's what
for those two
that's
options?
what I'm raising.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know that we do. I don't know that we have the, I mean, I think we can go through the budget pretty quickly and say, okay, this point 2 is now, I think we could come up with an idea, but what I don't want to do is say K to 6 is the best configuration and we're going to have savings, without being able to say, unless someone can say to me, yeah, we're going to save this much money.
I don't think we
the
want you
issue
to say that, though.
No, but what I don't want the public to think is that we're making a decision by saying there will be savings, any type of,
And you shouldn't.
right.
You should only make the decision right now, well, for the next meeting, educationally, how would you like to, or what would you like to support educationally? It is not cast in stone. If we find out the costs are just so out of control that we can't do it, then that's the path we follow. But educationally, what do you feel would be the best for the students in Georgetown? that's what you need to decide.
Right, but we also need to,
You do.
balance.
But you're
Yeah,
gonna run
There's
into
a-
issues.
But there's a point when you're gonna balance that is gonna be when you have a chance to look at all the options.
Right.
Including the costs of what those options are gonna be. That's when you're gonna get to be part of the discussion about, okay, we might have liked K6, that might be what we really
But
think
that-
is best, but given what we have in front of us, all the information together between the building committee and the school committee, there will be an opportunity for you to say, okay, well, maybe we're not going to be able to get the option we preferred. But at least you will have had a chance to discuss it as a committee and.
Right.
But that'll all be
guide the
vetted
group.
at some point.
Yes.
But
Yes, it
right now,
will.
for them to move forward, they need to, for us to make
We
a
would just like your
decision about-
support. We're still gonna pursue all of
the
these
options.
options.
We have
We're
to.
gonna cost them out, but we can't give facts because if we build a new school and it's really green, the cost savings would be different than if we do a renovation and an addition, which will be different than if we just renovate. So they're actually going to price out and give us a prediction, am I right, of each of those scenarios.
And part of the report that we'll do, the second, there's like two phases of this report. And the first phase is what we're speaking about tonight. But part of the second phase is to say, okay, based on the options of renovate and expand or build new is all of these kind of operational costs you're talking about. Each one of those will come with different scenarios of staffing and busing and things like that. We'll do that as part of the analysis that you've already done. You've submitted a budget statement for your town already. You've submitted it to the authority. You did that way back when. We take that information, we start to glean from that for each one of these options. What are the impacts to those budgets? But going back to why we're here tonight, the first phase is all about, as we've said, the educational program. And if you could bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to try to read through this list. What we have to submit first is the educational program. Carl has to help you prepare that, working with the superintendent's office. And it talks about these 12 or 13 line items here, and none of them address money. They all address the educational issues. Grade and school configuration policies, class size policies, teaching methodology and structure, teacher planning and room assignment policies, pre-kindergarten sped only tuition programs, locations, etc. They want this whole analysis of how it ties into your educational program. So what we're saying is, let us work with you and just hear your thoughts on this K to 6, 1 to 6 option, and then we'll start to create this ed program based on where you think you want to go with this. And I say think you want to go, because as Ellie said, the next step is we start to evaluate all those and say, okay, that's really a thing.
And you have
It's
a role
hard
in
to
that.
do with the
You
K
have a
to
role in
6 and the
that.
1 to 6 and the 2 to 6. But if you really think your heads are at looking at an educational process where, as this gentleman just said, a K to 6, keep them in the building and move through. That's the first step. And then you want to hear all the other things. So I just want to make sure we can get back to really focus on the educational things. Rob's 100% right. The next step is we really get into the numbers. We'll start to, we won't have hard numbers because you're still drawing information from concepts, but you'll have hard numbers.
Just
You're not locking in
for my
anything.
own clarification, if the committee says yes, in favor of K through 6, all in one building, Carl, are you still studying a 1 through 6 configuration?
Yes,
Yeah, they're doing
Because-
all three.
because the state has asked us to,
They're doing,
for comparative
We're-
purposes.
and you're
Not
doing
stopping.
9 scenarios, aren't
More or
it?
less,
Yeah.
Right?
round numbers.
Yeah, because you're
They're up
doing,
and down.
Reno,
They'll
Reno,
change
add
each
new.
day,
New.
and-
K to 6, 1 to 6, 2 to 5.
right,
and
so,
then there's
every
We can
round
hire a
variation,
mathematician to do the
cetera.
permutation.
yeah, so we're kind
It
of,
could be 9 and then 9A, 9B, 9C.
so we're gonna be
10,
looking at
oh, yeah.
least 9 scenarios
Exactly.
that we have to, get our arms
But
around.
as a committee, you have to take a stand educationally, how you would like to drive the project.
Right.
So that's what we would like, I mean, because as a committee, you could say, you know what? I don't think kindergarten belongs in the first grade. First grade 1 through 6. You know, you could make that decision right out there, and then the emphasis might be a little less in the direction that you're choosing. That's why we want you to make a decision.
Right. And we
Because
need
it
And
does
the
drive
MSBA
it.
wants to know
Right.
Right.
what the educational organization's preferences are.
They want
They
to know.
require
what
it.
They really
Carol thinks of
pay
it.
attention to
She
it.
has to, with our help, author this part of the report. She has to author the educational program. And part of the program that we're going to help her write, there is an entire, maybe a page or two, that this was discussed with the school committee. The school committee's feelings were, as the educational oversight body for the town, the school committee's feelings were that this process and this program works or does not work for the following reasons. And that's why I'm taking notes as we're sitting here, and I'll probably watch your tape later to make sure I get all the notes, is because it becomes part of that report.
Right. Well, when I came into this meeting tonight, I'm an advocate of K to 6. I appreciate everything you gave me tonight, because then I wasn't really thinking of all those things. But I think I'm going to leave tonight still with the K to 6. I think that's great for the kids educationally. You know, I think it's better that they don't make that transition from one school to another at such a young age. So that's my position.
Okay.
Well, I agree with Ellie. I think, the responsibility of the school committee is, yes, we have responsibilities to the town, but our number one goal really is to be a passionate advocate for the students. I mean, that's our responsibility. So I think that, while I have questions about use of space and things like that, I think I'm inclined to support a K through 6 as well. I mean, I'm aging myself, but when I was a kid, that's what it was the norm. It was, at least in Minnesota was, that it was K to 6, then you had junior high, 7 through 9, so, back in the day. So,
I did in Peabody.
oh, you did? So, I think, from, well, I appreciate all the questions. We all have questions, but I think, and just for my own self, I agree with, I came into the meeting not really knowing where the discussion was going to go, but, just listening to it, it makes perfect sense to not have multiple transitions. And I referenced earlier that I'd like to do some homework, because I do like to do that. I like to do, to do some of my own
still
searching.
should.
And
I'm going to do that.
To generate
Right.
this kind of thought.
But it makes sense that you don't have kids going, from kindergarten and then
Right.
transferring to a new building. I mean, I was talking to a colleague at work today whose kindergarten was having, sort of anxiety riding the bus and the whole 9 yards. And she has twins. And I said, we see the transition from Pembroke to the middle high school. We still have, the kids have difficult transition, and they're 12 years old, so not Hartford probably, not Matt Hartford probably. So anyway, I tend to, I'm inclined to support the K through 6, so.
I like the configuration. My only concern, and I mean, I had this when my kids went from Pembroke to middle school, is the kindergartners going to school with the 6th graders. And that's just something that, and I'm not saying that that's the reason why you should have them in a separate building, and I appreciate the transitions, but as long as we can acknowledge that and have some, like you alluded to, a different drop-off where, moms or dads or guardians want to get out and get their child into class, and, by the end of kindergarten, they'll be dropping them off as fast as everyone else, but.
Part of the social issue, I mean, do they ride the bus together now, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Do they?
K to 5.
Yeah, that's-
K to 5, yeah.
Yeah, in some districts, we talk a lot about separating the schools, and then everyone steps back and realize the kids ride the bus
Oh, yeah,
together.
on the bus,
And that's
right.
where a lot of stuff happens.
There are a lot of
We have
really
to deal with it.
educational and program opportunities too.
Yeah.
For example, I was always in larger elementary schools, and the 5th and 6th graders would be buddies to second
yeah.
graders. They have
We did
second
that
grade
in
reader buddies.
Right.
and
We had buddy
they
classrooms.
help
They were
with the
great.
kindergartens. We really miss out on that opportunity
That's in the
now.
literature too, sort of role modeling, that the
Right.
older students are role models for the younger students
Yeah.
in a
But-
multi-grade
but
school.
the school could be designed in such a way that where the placement of
Oh,
various levels.
It's like a
of
lower
classes
school
would-
and an upper
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
I mean, it really
It
is,
is.
the way it can be set up.
But
Different waves for lunches and things like that, so you're
Right.
not having that.
It's that same anxiety when you know your 6th grader is going to school with 12th graders.
that's exactly,
But I think that's right. I think that's just normal.
that's
Right.
exactly how
It
I'm looking
doesn't
at it.
matter what the configuration is, parents are going to have that anxiety.
Right.
Right.
So I think that's where, as a board, you hire the right people and help alleviate those concerns to the best of your ability.
And I already said what my opinion was. So.
Yeah, I think what we should do is, we'll vote next meeting.
Absolutely.
But I think each one of us needs to do our own, research and, reach out to people to get the answers that are missing and, things that aren't there.
And I would suggest, as we'd like to become the funneling point, as you have questions, if you need to email them to Ellie, get them to me, and we'll work with Carl to make sure he's
Right.
getting them, and we'll respond to you as quick as we can, so you're prepared when we come in.
Right.
We'll work that way through, so.
I think the only thing I wanted to add is that there's no question, advocating for the children is at the very top, but for me, I don't see it being mutually exclusive from also the town. I don't want to, and I talked a lot about this when I was running for school committee. I don't want to accept this discussion of kids in the town. I want it to be one. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. With that being said, my hunch is, and never say never, but my hunch is to bring kindergarten there, which I'm absolutely in favor of. It's going to create new construction. It's going to be, I'm guessing, very difficult to work with a renovation. And that's going to have a cost implication of where this whole process is going. And so I'm just putting that out there, that's all. And my concern is that in the design process, then, cost aside, the stress on kids and children growing up today is getting more and more intense. And we are only children once. And I think it's very important that the children and in kindergarten and the design of how they live their lives during the day in that school respects who they are versus the other grades. They're gonna get there soon enough, and the stress that comes with it soon enough. It'll be fun during the design process.
But just to leave you with that thought, that, as you said, you will get other looks at this because, I don't want to say despite how you vote, but even though you may favor one scheme, as Rob says, the way the site accommodates one program versus another may affect your decision down the line.
Absolutely.
If you feel that, getting that number of students on the site compromises some kind of educational delivery, you might, rethink this. The site is tight, it's limited, it has wetlands, it has slopes, it has, contours, ledge to deal with. So we don't have a
Turtles.
nice, free, open, 100-acre site or something to choose from. And it will be a challenge.
And that's why we have 9 scenarios to look at.
Right.
And,
But we have
Right.
and
taken
flush
off
out.
A few.
6 of them.
Right.
And in closing from my end, if I could, just want to address Jim here. Excuse me, I forgot his last name already. I apologize. I wrote it down. Mr. Picone, or Dr. Picone. Mentioned about the model school program through the MSBA. We've already reviewed that program with the authority. We've discussed it as an option. As everybody knows and discussed, you have to be invited into the program from the school building authority. Since they've reviewed the site, they've walked the site, they have reviewed the information we've always given to them. They have not come down and written us this letter yet, but their indications to us so far is that you would not be a candidate for the model school program to be invited in the model school program. The model school program is a great program. Carl's got a school, or I think, in the program, and most of the firms do, but they're designed for very specific sites. And it's hard, we've gone through this in that analysis for some other towns, it's hard to fit, quote-unquote, a model school onto a site that has the constraints that your site has, unfortunately.
Topographically,
You've
it's
got
something.
topographical
Probably a perfect
issues.
square with
It's
flat.
It's a nice flat site, it's a
Right.
nice thing. We've discussed it with them as from their project managers. They've reviewed it with us and said, well, we've always looking for opportunities to invite programs into the model school. We're not quite sure that this is a good one for the town of Georgetown. They haven't written us that letter yet, so don't take that as, that's they're all and the end all with it, but I think this is what we'll hear from them.
Well, it's
So
being
we've
considered,
reviewed it
which
as
is
a
what
great
which is what you want.
Which we did, and we explored it with them, we discussed it with them, and they said, thank you. You just might have a hard time making that.
So if someone's out there with a perfectly flat 100-acre site that they want to
Bring it on.
donate,
We
would love
that.
all school there, so.
We actually said that in one community, and one of the retired farmers came forward and said, I have a farm for you. So it actually worked.
So, all right, so there's hope.
And who knows, maybe they'll come up with
It
one
was incredible.
similar to our site.
All right, so we will be prepared at the next meeting to vote.
Please send
on the
questions.
grade configuration,
If
and
you let me
everybody,
know, then we'll-
please contact Ellie, and then she'll funnel
Look at
questions out.
this. We talk every day anyhow, so.
And if
Join
there's
us
specific
next week if
information
you
you
can,
might need me to.
Yes, please
And
come to
join
the
us
meeting.
next week if you
Oh,
can.
Oh,
at the
absolutely,
community
next,
meeting.
We'll be there.
next Thursday
interesting.
night,
7
Pembroke,
o'clock.
7 to 8:30,
It's an interesting thing.
community
It's very cool.
school building project.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Okay.
I bet we've crossed paths somewhere before.
The next, let's see, next is the administrative reports.
Right.
Superintendent.
Yep, there's just a couple of quick things that I want to, it looks like the second bulleted item I think we've covered, which was the community meeting at the Pembroke School. So the first, I just wanted to update people in the community as well as the committee on the Pearly roof. There are sort of, Rob asked me to be prepared to talk about the CPC funding, so I just want to clarify, there are two discussions going on on the roof. The first is the discussion about the roof that collapsed, the one over the kindergarten and first grade wing. What I wrote to you about in your notes is what I'll talk about there. The second is, if you recall, we had Mr. Hart come before you, David Hart, who was hired to do a conditions assessment on the historic part of the Pearly School, which is the front side. And just to give you a quick update on that, Mr. Hart did complete his assessment. In fact, part of his contract is that he comes before the school committee and makes a very short presentation about what he's found in terms of the various things within the school that would be requiring restoration. And he's actually identified costs, because at some point here, we're going to need to make decisions, priority decisions, as to how we want to approach going back to CPC, maybe in a phased plan, to try to get the funds for the things that we think of as the highest priorities. There is $200,000 in the available from the CPC that they've already approved for the project, but yeah, I think the conditions assessment has to come out of that. So we have an assessment cost invoice from Mr. Hart that you will have to look at when next week, when I put it in your packet, or the 22nd, when I put it in your packet, and with your permission, we'll invite Mr. Hart to that meeting. He could do a very quick summary, and then we, as a committee, you would have to recommend. You'd be satisfied with the status of the report, and that you would recommend the funding of the invoice, support of the funding of the invoice to the CPC. I talked to Harry Locatilia today, and we went through the steps. So that's the update on the historic Pearly roof. The update on the roof over the kindergarten and first grade wing is that I met, actually Margaret and I met with Charles Sacra, who is the structural engineer that worked with us when the roof collapsed to get the temporary solution, and an associate of his named Bill White, who is an architect with the group he works with. Apparently, according to the insurance company, we do not need to bid this out. That the insurance company has said that in fact, he put Charles on this and said, work with the school department to find out exactly what you would suggest doing to replace it. When we met with them, basically, we said we really want to just replace what was there, because they did say, well, we're in there, would you like to update the lighting? Would you like to, do, windows, carpets? And we're like, I said, I felt like I could speak on behalf of the committee to say, we need to replace what the insurance will cover, because they're not going to cover things that are extra. Their point was, while you're in there and we're doing this, it's easy enough to do it. And I,
Of course.
unless you tell me differently, I think I speak for the committee when I say, we want to create a pitched roof. They discussed shingles, and then they discussed, with the difference between the space between the flat roof and the pitched roof. The insulation would be on top of the flat roof. They feel that would give it would be more airtight, and it would be sufficient. Obviously, it looks like the issue with the collapsed roof, other than an excessive snow load, was that there were some structural questions about the truss system. And obviously, the new truss system would be all up to code, and everything would be done according to current standards. And one of the advantages is that the roof would now, of course, be able to withstand a more heavy snow load. So I think he said the difference is that the new standards are up to 50 pounds per square foot. So basically, since this is a 2 to 3 month process, I give you in the notes a timeline, task and timeline of how this would go forward. So their plan is that they're developing a proposal with a scope of the work and an actual budget, which will be done in October. Then they're going to create construction documents. They're going to come out and conduct field visits. They're going to determine the bidding process. They're actually going to prepare the bids. And that work is all going to be done between October and January. Then they will award the bid in February or March. Construction would begin after June 18th, when school is out. And in the bid specifications, they will be crystal clear that this can't be a project that goes over time. That, in fact, depending on when we do the calendar and we determine what the first day of school is, we need to be sure that this whole project is wrapped up before the start of school.
Will they build penalties into
Well,
delays?
that's something we can ask them, yeah, when, you'll have a chance to, when they do the scope of the work, I'll come back again to you, and you can take a look at that, and if there's things that you want to, speak to them about, I'm sure that we can do it there. So, just so the community knows, that project is going forward, this is the task and timeline, and if you have any specific questions that you'd like me to direct, like such as the question you just asked me, Rob, direct to them in my conversations with them, I'll be absolutely sure to make sure that that's represented.
Is there any opportunity for storage up there?
No, actually, Margaret and I said, well, can you create a second floor? And he said, no. So there isn't really, the way they are constructing it, there really isn't any storage opportunity there. But, just to be sure, I will definitely ask them.
If there was,
a matter
it
of getting
wouldn't
it.
cost any more, but just when they're designing their roof and their truss system, to take into account a future access point.
Okay, so let me, right, because you have to get up there, right. Okay, so I will ask them that, question when I speak to them. And you wanted me to ask about penalties built in, right?
Just so the deadline issue is, because school starts.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. And then finally, just to report to you, I think the good news that I want to report to you, and Peter, you might have to help me with this, because you were talking to me about new information today I didn't know. But I do want to make sure, if you haven't heard the good news, Georgetown was noted in Boston, in the Boston magazine, publishing its list of Boston's best public schools for 2011. And this is based on MCAS performance in ELA, math, and science at grades 5, 8, and 10, and SAT scores in English, writing, and math. And Georgetown ranked in the top 50. So we were 48th in the state. Last year we were 70th, so that's a huge improvement. Peter, what did you tell me about the MCAS scores between grades 8 and 10?
We were ranked, we had the third best improvement in the state from 8th to 10th grade.
And was that based on the last spring's MCAS? Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
so that's great.
We actually, it's been interesting. I had a couple of parents who emailed it. They must have seen it, and then I noticed that they had passed it out to a lot of the people on their email lists. And I've had a lot of people that have taken the time to write emails congratulating, and obviously the staff earns that and deserves a ton of credit. But I do appreciate the recognition from parents that that they are very happy to get that news, and we were very proud of the recognition. And then, finally, just the beginning of school went very well. We do have a couple of positions, as I noted in here, one of which is the business manager's position that we're trying to fill. We also had just a few bus issues, just a few. It was actually a pleasure this year. And thanks to Barry Belanger, who I think did a really great job handling all of the questions and concerns. The only other thing that has come up, and you might hear about this, it's been raised by a few parents. I wouldn't say there's a huge hue and cry, but I think it's worth noting to you. And that is that, as you recall with the crossing guards, last year we funded 2 additional crossing guards. The police public safety budget has generally the allocation for crossing guards. And they have 2 full-time crossing guard salaries there. They have volunteer, George Comiskey very nicely volunteers on East Main Street. And then we pay a woman, one of our aides, to oversee the drop-off in front of the high school. But we did have on Andover Hill, remember, we had a crossing guard there, and we had another crossing guard over by Central Street. In talking with the police department this summer, talking with David Surface, who, talked with the finance committee, and we, of course, used money that we no longer have, if you recall. The decision of all the people is we need to go with what we've got unless there's an additional funding source that we can, either we come up with or the town comes up with to support particularly the restoration of the guard on Andover Hill. Now, the people I've talked to, we said, what, we get it that that's a dangerous area, but when we look at the data that we collected last year in terms of the actual number of people who used the crossing guards at both of those 2 locations, it wasn't even used every day. And there were very few students who did use it. So if we're going to do it from a data perspective, then it wouldn't be worth the money. But obviously, I can certainly appreciate the concerns the parents have. I just bring it to your attention in case you hear it. At this point, we're going with what we have,
What
but,
is the cost associated with one,
well,
roughly?
I believe that the police have said $3,000 to $4,000 a year has been what we've.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the responsibility for funding these positions is whose?
Well, right now, the responsibility for crossing guards, it rests in the police department's budget listed in the public safety budget.
So they've chosen not to fund.
Well, they've chosen, they've basically been given the money they've been given, and they said what they can do is continually fund the 2 positions. So when I was asked, what do you want to do with them? I said, well, priority is in front of the schools. So one of those people that the police department paid for goes in front of Pearlie, and the other goes in front of Pembroke. And then, as I said, we take care of the middle high school and then the volunteers.
So when they had to reduce their budget, they chose to reduce?
Actually, no, I don't think that was a reduction. I think that's consistent. What we did last year, because we changed the bus routes, remember, and there was a lot of concern on the people who, many of the people who used to get a bus off of Andover Hill no longer qualified.
So we funded?
So we funded it out of our stimulus
that?
money,
Okay.
remember?
But who's doing the crossing guard in front of the Pearlie, and at what time do they work?
Well, since I'm not in charge of that, I'm not sure, but it's one of the gentlemen that the police department hired.
Okay.
And they're supposed to be there, obviously, before the start of the school day in terms of.
Pearlie
when-
school day or high school?
Or high school?
Oh, are you talking about the Pearlie drop-off? Is that what you're
Well, I'm
wondering
just,
about?
they're not there?
They're just for the Pearlie, they're
Just
for the Pearlie school.
That's, okay, that's all I
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah, they're just for the Pearlie school. Other than that, as Peter has said, there have been some technology glitches with the servers, which we do need a solution for. We're in the process of collecting information on that. Class sizes are reasonable with the exception of a couple of things at the middle school. The 8th grade numbers tend to be high in one section, block G, F, D, so one of those blocks.
We changed it 3 times. So
Okay.
was G and we resolved that, and now it's D.
Okay, so there's,
We're working on the resolution, fair to say?
yeah, and that's happening because
there is
of, that's happening because of shared staff sometimes and their availability certain periods. So, I'm very happy that we're continuing to
looking
talk
at it
about it,
and-
we're looking at it.
Okay.
The other
all we can
was a transition in the 6th grade, again, around, the transition of Mary Ellen leaving and no one being there this summer. There was some questions and concerns that were raised regarding 2 things. One was the equity of the placement of students on the 2 teams, and parents wanted to make sure that they were balanced on both teams, that one team wasn't very strong and the other team was with students who had, some greater needs. So Brian has been looking into that, and I think Belief sent a letter home saying that he was confident, based on all the people he talked to, that there was balance on the teams. The second issue was the 6th grade math placements, because they're basically paced for math, and obviously because Brian was new and there for about 2 weeks when it was raised as an issue, he has pulled together the staff. He's working with Donna, who knows the children, and they're taking into consideration that information, applying the criteria that was agreed to last year in terms of how students were going to be placed, and decisions will be made soon, and students will be moved if it's appropriate, but at least the parents will have an opportunity to get an answer to why my child was placed in that particular class. So those are just a couple of things that, we just need, obviously, with, with new principal, hopefully, I think you promised to stay at least for a little while, that, this kind of a thing should not happen in the future, because it was as a result, unfortunately, due to the transition and some assumptions and expectations that, for whatever reason, just didn't transmit. Listen, I know it's a problem, we're working, diligently to make sure that we rectify, any questions and concerns that have arisen. Other than that, you probably have your perspectives on how school started for your children, because you all have children in the schools, but from our point of view, I think we feel that it's really been a pretty smooth start.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Carol. All right, moving on to financial report.
So we're going to table.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, we're doing school reports?
No, we have no school reports. We initially discussed that, but since you had such extensive reports from the principals on the readiness for their school, and unless anybody,
do you guys have anything we need to add?
anything you want to add to anything I said, or something you want to feature?
I
Sure.
would just like to comment and to reiterate the parking issue at Pearlie. Faculty parking in front of the school has worked wonderfully again. And I just, again, if parents aren't aware of that parking in front of the school is for staff and faculty, and the visitor parking is 1 through 12. But to date, it's been working well. The only kink that, again, there's always the ripple effect. Now I need to help parents understand that they can't come into the parking lot at around 3 o'clock when pre-K is leaving. Pre-K does a queue pickup. Parents drive through, they pick up their pre-K child and drive out. But what's happening is, and I'm not really sure who is parking in the visitor at that time and pulling out, but they're pulling out when the queue is trying to go through. So
That's a hard thing.
it's not really, children aren't walking because they're with their parents getting in the cars, but it's stopping the flow of the traffic. So unlike the safety issue before where parents and children are crossing, and that was the safety issue, this is like, it's just really blocking the queue.
3 o'clock, you said?
3?
Around 3 o'clock.
So it's not
if
the middle high
parents are
school
listening
parents.
to
No,
this-
Yeah, no, so it's
the
later.
And there's
elementary.
only like 4 of us there.
Okay.
For pickups. So,
All right.
No, it's either parents that have come in earlier to pick
Right,
up other
'cause they want
children
a spot.
and are trying to
Okay.
leave,
Spot.
or pre-K parents that have parked and gone in to get their child and now are trying to leave.
It's kind of
So
like
we
if
just
you
need
go
to-
in and you get in the slot, you're kind of stuck there.
well, you can get out, but you just can't get out at 3 when they
Right,
start.
just to wait for the queue to
Stop
go
chit-chatting on
by.
the sidewalk. Get your car.
So
Okay.
Margaret, can parents now drive in and park there to get their children?
No.
No, it's
No,
not.
they're still not supposed to. Visitors is just for visiting during the hours that the
That's
children
what I
are in
suspect is
school.
happening
Right.
in Burby.
But dismissal is still you park your car and walk.
Right.
Yes, and honestly, I really can't tell you how smooth that's been, and the front with buses has been incredibly smooth. And the parking lot is blocked off, but at about 5 of 3, the barriers are removed so that
Right.
pre-K parents can get through. So again, I don't think it's parents, coming in, parking, and necessarily getting children, just they may have parked to get their pre-K child and gone in for one reason or another, and just so simultaneously, they're all leaving. So it's been pretty smooth, it's just that one kink. So I'm hoping, that's the next word I've got to get out to parents. But other than that, it's been very smooth.
Good idea,
Right.
Annie.
Yay, me. Okay, next is a financial report. We were going to talk about the server replacement proposal,
We
but
have
we're
to
going to
table that.
discuss that in the future. We talked about it at Budget and Finance. We're getting some more information. School choice update?
Well,
Do we have?
actually, the
Oh, okay, why don't we go through,
yeah, I mean, you can do that. The purpose of it being in your packet was to support
just to let you
the
know.
discussion about the servers,
Yeah,
but
so there's really, we don't have great information on an update for that right now.
Okay.
We have 8 graduating seniors. We review every, 12 this year, 8?
12 in FY 12.
Okay, 8 last year. Subcommittee reports. We just had a Budget and Finance Committee meeting right before this where we talked about potential options for replacing the middle high school servers and looking at the entire district. Excuse me, Peter's going to go back and relook at our options, and probably at the next meeting, we might have a better understanding of where we're going with that. And we'll meet, I'm guessing, within the next 2 weeks again.
Because we really need to talk about the budget
And-
and you want budget priority discussion.
I guess, yeah, I'll move that up from new business. One of the things that the FinCom has asked is that we get them a budget estimate in December this year. So we need to start talking as a committee what our budget priorities are. So at the next meeting, if you could come prepared just to talk about our budget for next year, some of the things that you'd like to see changed, shifting priorities, just so we can have a productive discussion.
Now, Ian, when was it normally, if they're asking for December? Was it February, March?
Yes.
Yeah, February, March.
We got, the way it used to work is we got information from the principals in December, basically.
Yep.
And
Well, you
then.
did. We did.
Well, I did.
Carol
And
would
then-
gather
And
it.
then we started to review it with Budget and Finance Subcommittee. Principals obviously were meeting with us in terms of their budget, and then we would come and look at this as a committee. Usually, you first looked at it in late January.
Yeah.
And
So
then
it's quite
you
a
would-
difference.
you kind of adopted your budget in mid-February.
Right.
And then, as long as we got it to the town by March, that worked, but they're asking for it to be earlier this year.
I don't understand why, because our numbers just get harder the later we go from the state.
Right, so
The
I think-
earlier, looking at this and trying to
I think there's
forecast a
room for
budget in
discussion with
December,
that.
Yeah, they're
when
not,
we have no budget numbers for
Yeah.
FY13
I think maybe it's fair to
seems
say we
insane
could
me.
move it up sooner, but maybe December might be a little early. I think there's room for discussion with FinCom on that.
exactly, and I think it's a matter of what we're actually able to provide them in December, because right now we're faced with a year-end report, which is due at the end of September. I think, are there other reporting things that are due like October, November-ish? I might be off on that.
Yeah, that's the enrollment report.
That's the enrollment, but, so, what we can actually provide is gonna be the question. And then we also need, on the other side, guidance from them as to what our budget number will be, and shall we assume that we get the entire amount of the override that we received this year? And what type of number they're looking at. Are they looking at level funded, level services? It's the same discussion every year.
I mean, you have to be careful, because my experience has always been that whatever number you come out with your preliminary budget, even though you
Is-
say it's preliminary, somehow it sticks.
You're reconciling to that for the
Then
next
you're-
3
then you're-
months.
Yeah, and then, people, if it's an increase, people get concerned about it before they need to get concerned about it, before the process is fully vetted. So, I just think we have to be mindful of that and work with the FinCom and try to figure out what is,
And have some more
as accurate as
discussion about
possible.
it.
That's right.
Right, so, but next week, if we can, or next meeting, if we can just talk about priorities and, where you see weaknesses, where you think things need to shift. Okay, governance.
We have a meeting set up for the 22nd. 22nd?
No, 15th.
15th at 9. Sorry.
Great.
15th at 9 a.m., and we're going to discuss which policy sections we're going to review this year. And move forward from there.
Okay. Negotiating? Dave?
We have a meeting, is it the 14th? Do you remember?
I don't have my
You're
calendar.
talking about negotiations?
Negotiation meeting
canceled
with
so many
the 14th,
times.
yeah, with the.
It is the 14th at
with the
6:45.
custodians, Union for the custodians.
Okay, excellent. New business, we just talked about the budget priorities for FY13, which we'll go through next week. And then finally, we have the declaration of surplus math books.
Right, so included in your packet is a list of surplus materials that were compiled by our math department chair at the middle high school, Paula Utter, for unused and very old textbooks. So upon your approval, we're just going to declare these items surplus, and both Mrs. Utter and Principal Lucia will coordinate the proper removal and disposal.
Note that we could not even sell them
Yes.
because they were too old.
They were too old.
The chair will entertain a motion to declare the math textbooks listed in Mrs. Utter's memo as surplus to be just removed and disposed of by proper protocol.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We will be going to executive session, so we will adjourn out of this, go into executive session, and we will not be returning to regular session. So So the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session under Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subchapter 2, for the purpose of negotiating with Mr. Pecone. And it's roll call. Rob?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Good night,
We are
everyone.
now in executive session. Good night.
Night. Thank you.